Denmark says it will summon the U.S. ambassador over the appointment of a special envoy to Greenland, warning Washington to respect its sovereignty. The governor of Louisiana has been given the new post for the autonomous Danish territory. He has repeated Trump's call for the U.S. to take over the island.
Dragged out of hibernation and back under the gaze of Donald Trump, Greenland has returned to the forefront of the US president's mind. More specifically, his desire to take control of the Danish territory. Trump announced on social media that he was appointing Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as special envoy to Greenland. Landry immediately responded by vowing he would work to make Greenland a part of the US. The appointment and Landry's statement have triggered outrage in Denmark and Greenland.
Out of nowhere, there's now a special US presidential representative who, according to the envoy himself, is tasked with taking over Greenland. This is, of course, completely unacceptable.
Trump has made no secret of his desire to make Greenland part of the United States. He has repeatedly said the island is essential to US national security and shown a keen interest in its rich deposits of minerals. But while Greenlanders largely support independence from Denmark, polls have also shown an overwhelming majority have no interest in becoming part of the US.
They can forget all about that. Greenland must be independent outside of the US, Russia and all major nations.
I don't know what Trump thinks about Greenland. He just keeps going. I find it hard to see what his intention is with this.
The governments of both Denmark and Greenland are adamant that the island is not for sale. But Trump has refused to rule out using force to take what he wants, even from a NATO ally.
Let's cross over now to Rachel Rizzo. She's a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and joins me now from Salt Lake City in Utah. So we haven't been hearing about Greenland for months now, and suddenly Trump appoints a special envoy. What do you make of that?
Well, what you said is correct. This issue sort of went silent for months after we had been hearing about it over and over again at the beginning of 2024. And I think a lot of us who watched this issue closely kind of thought that it was a done deal, especially after J.D. Vance's and Usha Vance's trip to Greenland earlier this year that didn't really go that well. But I think with this news today that he is appointing Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as a special envoy, it shows that this is still very much a live issue for him. And it's something I think that we need to take very seriously. He, like you said, hasn't ruled out using force to take Greenland, although I think that's still sort of a crazy idea and it's not something that we should take seriously. But I do think he's looking for something here. And what that something is, if it's actually making Greenland a part of the United States, I think we have to see what he will be willing to do in order to make that happen.
Quite unsurprisingly, there's been a lot of criticism of the appointing of the special envoy here in Europe, but you're in the U.S. So the question is, how exactly is this playing in the United States?
Well, I think it's really a confusing issue for a lot of people because, as I mentioned before, we haven't really heard about Greenland for months at this point. We thought it was sort of a done deal. But as you mentioned in your opening report, polls in Greenland show that Greenlanders do not want to be a part of the United States. They want to be an independent nation, free from the U.S. and free from other countries like Russia. Polls earlier in 2024 also showed that this was not a popular idea in the United States. Americans did not want the U.S. to acquire Greenland, either by economic force or by military coercion. And so I think let's see how this plays out. But I don't think it's a popular idea on either side of the Atlantic, certainly not in Denmark.
Let's take a look at what Trump says about Greenland. He says it's essential to U.S. national security. Is that something you agree with, or do you think Trump has other reasons for wanting to annex the territory?
No, No, I mean, I think he's serious when he says that he believes it's a key, important issue to U.S. national security. I mean, this is a strategically significant region up in the Arctic. The U.S. has military assets as well as military personnel stationed there. There are natural resources in Greenland, like critical raw materials, although this is an island that is covered in some places 2 miles of ice. So any venture there to take those critical minerals would be exorbitantly expensive and would take years. I mean, we're looking at a very long timeline here. So while it's important, especially when you look at how important the Arctic region is to not just U.S. security, but to NATO as well, I understand that. But acquiring Greenland does not mean, or the fact that it's important does not mean that the United States needs to acquire Greenland, only that it is working in lockstep with Denmark and our NATO allies. I think that is much more important than trying to acquire it.
Now, on the point of NATO, Trump has not ruled out military force to take control of Greenland, and we know Denmark is already adding to its defenses on the island. What do these territorial tensions between two NATO members mean for the alliance?
I mean, I think this is very significant. It's obviously not the first time that there have been military tensions between NATO allies. We saw this happen decades ago, for example, with Greece and Turkey. But the United States is the foundational member of NATO. When you look at the mutual defense agreements, when you look at Article 5, the significance of Article 5 really, I think at this point, still lies in the military capabilities and the deterrence capabilities that the United States brings to the alliance. So the fact that a NATO ally, the United States, is potentially threatening another NATO ally, Denmark, is unprecedented. And I think it's something that we need to take really seriously. This is a live issue and something that we're going to be talking about, it seems, for the coming weeks, months, and maybe even years.
That was Rachel Rizzo, a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. As always, thank you very much for your expertise.
Thanks.
Jennifer Spence is the director of the Arctic Initiative at Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. Jennifer, what do you read into Trump's appointment?
Yes, well, I think we've sort of been here. We aren't terribly surprised, maybe a little disappointed to see this come back in the news the way that it has. The fact that a special envoy has been assigned to Greenland is not necessarily in and of itself a bad thing. I think we much more are concerned by what we see in the position being taken by the new special envoy, Jeff Laundrie, and his very clear position that this is an agenda to take over another independent country.
So what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, we've already seen a very swift response from both Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. This is by no means of any surprise. And I think what we need to sort of look at is also the response of others across the world. And I think what we're seeing is a very strong response that this is not considered appropriate behavior, and that we really need to begin to consider how we expect the United States to work with its allies.
Trump hasn't ruled out military force to take control over Greenland. Would he really attack a fellow NATO member?
I don't think we're at that point. I think that there's a lot of rhetoric involved in what is being said right now. I think it should be taken very seriously. I think it should be concerning. International relations has been built on sort of an element of trust and partnership and allyship. And we're not seeing that right now. But this isn't inconsistent with what we've seen from the Trump administration, both the first Trump administration and this administration. And so I think it's fair to say that these kinds of statements will continue to be made, but there aren't really the mechanisms. And I do think we would see a very swift response from the international community if the United States chose to take that kind of approach with its allies.
What about the logic and reasoning behind this? Trump says Greenland is essential to U.S. national security. How so?
Well, I mean, there are many sort of elements to this. There's the military component, the sort of idea of the security and safety of the United States and of the Arctic as a whole. And so there's that kind of position. But we also know very clearly that the U.S. has had a military presence in Greenland. There's been no resistance to that military presence. In fact, it's very much welcomed as part of the NATO alliance. Then there's also an economic component to it. We've heard around the issues around the potential access to minerals and energy, shipping routes, and these types of things are also considered quite central to the thinking behind the U.S. administration. But I would say that we need to keep in mind that these things do not require the acquisition of a country. And in fact, there's quite a number of opportunities, and Greenland itself has said they're not for sale, but they're open for business. And I think that that's a much more constructive approach for the U.S. administration to take at this point.
Jennifer Spence, Director of the Arctic Initiative at Harvard Kennedy School, thank you very much for chiming in.
Thank you.
DW's Terry Schultz joins us from Brussels. Terry, tell us about the reactions you're seeing to Trump's move.
Hi, Ben. Yes, we've seen reactions coming in throughout the day, starting, of course, with Danish and Greenlandic officials, the prime ministers of Greenland and Denmark, putting out a joint statement saying that national borders and sovereignties are matters of international law and that United States cannot simply annex another country. The reactions have spread across the Nordic countries, with the Norwegian and Swedish foreign ministers putting out statements saying they stand 100% behind Denmark, and Finnish foreign minister Elina Valtonen even putting out a rather lengthy statement on social media saying that she notes the sacrifices that Denmark has made in its friendship with the United States. Casualties, for example, in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, where Denmark has served alongside U.S. soldiers. And I even had a chance to ask the European Commission at its very last briefing of the year, Ben, the spokesman there giving a very terse, basically one-sentence answer saying that the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark, which of course includes Greenland, is a matter that is essential for the European Union.
So will this appointment of a special envoy by the US president reignite tensions over this whole issue?
Well, it's not only the appointment of an envoy, but of course those remarks that you said, that he intends to work hard on making Greenland part of the United States. That's the real outrage. And of course, the concern is, and we already see it happening, even with my own question to the European Commission, that this is going to bring Trump back into that cycle where he says that, yes, Greenland has to become part of the United States and that he will not rule out using force to make that happen. Remember those months of very high tension with Denmark and that trip that Vice President J.D. Vance made to Greenland, where basically the local population turned their backs on him because it was so uncomfortable for them. I think that Denmark, quite rightfully, is afraid that this is going to start another cycle of those kinds of statements, which, of course, are very worrisome for an ally.
Thank you very much. Terry Schultz in Brussels.